I'm beginning to understand that just as we move in our day-to-day lives, and just as we continue to grow and evolve as people, that we should focus on what we can do. And when I say that, I don't mean in the sense that we should almost ignore our faults and ignore the things that we're unable to do, but I really mean it in the context of our habits and substantiating change in our lives. I think that just in our day-to-day lives, oftentimes, whenever there's a bad habit that we want to break or there's something that we want to avoid, that we tend to focus on the thing that we're avoiding. But honestly, I think that's counterintuitive, and ultimately, I think that whatever we focus on, our energy goes towards. So, in trying to focus on not doing the bad thing, I think that by itself, you're then almost guiding your energy towards that bad thing to begin with, which will just propagate and substantiate that bad habit continuing to be in your life. But I think that if we really want to break any bad habits and if we really want to substantiate any positive change in our lives, that we should focus on what we can do. So, I always use like the same or a similar analogy in terms of fitness, but I think that in terms of dieting, when you're going on a diet and when you decide to do that, I think that it's better not to focus on what you can't eat, but rather focus on what you can. And I think in doing so, we're then positing so much freedom in our day-to-day lives, even though technically we are restricting ourselves in what we can do. Because I was thinking about this yesterday, but no matter how long you spend on writing down the amount of things that you can't do, there will always be more things that you can do. And I think that in anything, there's an infinite amount of choices that we could possibly make and an infinite amount of ways that we could go about it. So I think that in focus on what we can do rather than what we can't do or what we're not allowing ourselves to do, then we're allowing ourselves to exist in a world almost without the thing that we can't do, which will then just substantiate that change being more permanent in our lives. Something that I've been doing, I decided personally that for the month of February, I don't want to go on any social media and watch, any content that isn't really beneficial to my day-to-day life, to an extent. But in doing so, I realized just, it's only February, 6th today? I'm realizing that I'm not it's so much easier to break away from bad habits when instead of focusing on what you can't do, you focus on what you can do. I focus on the things that I do let myself watch, the things that I do allow myself to enjoy, rather than the things that I can't, and I end up not even thinking about the things that I'm unable to do, which then I think creates a more substantial change in our lives on what we can't do, and almost reinforces the fact that what we don't want to do is not a part of who we are and it's not the actions that we're continuing in our day-to-day lives. And I think that it goes a long way with everything. I think the brain is supposed to be a problem-solving machine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that in being a problem-solving machine, we end up focusing so much more on the negative than on the positive, while focusing on the positive erases the negative to begin with. I think that this goes along with something that I said in one of my other videos, that to desire is to not have. And when I said that, I meant in the sense that in focusing on lacking something, then you're almost continuing to lack in that thing. But then in focus on the gratitude for having said thing, then it's almost like you're allowing that thing to finally appear in your life, and you're allowing that gratitude to be substantiated by a change in the external world. But and I think that really just goes along with what I'm saying here, that we should focus on the positive and not the negative. Not to say that we should ignore the negative, but to say that we should almost establish that the negative is there, then focus on getting past that. Like, going back to, my personal story and with social media and things like that, it's not that I'm just ignoring, or it's not that I just ignored that social media was a problem that I was facing, but it's rather that I acknowledged that and then I moved on from it. What you don't resolve repeats. So I think that it's important that we almost acknowledge the negative things in our lives, then focus on the positive, which will then, or focus on making positive change, which will then erase the negative from permeating and from existing in our day-to-day lives. And I'm really just, it's such an interesting thing. I'm focusing so much more on the positive and what I can do, and I'm finding myself to be so much more present in the moment, and in just every day-to-day moment, I'm just feel so much more positive and so much more active and so much more energized rather than when I was focusing on the negative. Because like I said, our brains are a problem-solving machine, but you know, it's just, I think that when there is no problem to solve, that we create problems for ourselves. So instead of focusing on the problem, why don't we focus on ourselves being the solution? And in doing so, you're then allowing that solution to find itself in your life. It's it reminds me of the famous video from like 2016 where there were the people dancing inside the crowd, and then they told you to focus on the people dancing and counting them, so much so that you did not see like a guy in a gorilla costume walking through the entire set. And I think it really just reminds me of that. It's what you focus on is what exists for you. So I think that if we focus on the positive changes that we make in our lives rather than the negative things that we're going away from, then we'll begin to see the positive in our lives, and we'll almost begin to not ignore but almost not even recognize the negative things. And like I said, that's not to say that we should ignore anything negative in our lives, and we should solely focus on what's good and almost put to the side everything that we don't want in our lives. But it's to say that we should recognize what we don't want in our lives, then focus on the positives of not having that in your life. And in doing so, you're then allowing yourself not to experience that in your day to day. And you're really just allowing yourself to make that change more permanent and more substantiated. Because I think that ultimately, I think that if in order for any sustainable effort to be sustainable, it needs to be something that does not really require your energy. And when I say that, I mean in the sense that once something becomes, a strong enough habit, it's not something that you really think about doing. It's not something that you have to put any mental energy into doing. So I think the fastest way, and I think the most effective way to substantiate that positive change in your life and moving away from bad habits is to recognize the bad habit, then focus on everything else you can do instead of that bad habit. And in doing so, you're almost naturally allowing yourself to not do that thing by not even focusing on not doing that thing. That's all to say that I think we should just focus on the positive in our lives, and we should focus on what we can do. It reminds me of a quote from the Boondocks that said, well, one character was asking a different character, what do you do if you can't do nothing and there's nothing you could do? And then the other character responded, you do what you can. So I think that it's important that we focus on doing what we can. And in doing so, it's recognizing that we can do anything. And that in our day-to-day lives, I think that we literally have an infinite amount of options in any given moment. So no matter how much you restrict yourself from certain actions, you're never going to be able to restrict yourself enough to the point that there's more things that you can't do than things that you can do. I have a Bible verse that goes with the topic of this video pretty well. It's taken from Philippians 4, verse 8 to 9, and it says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent and prosperous. I think that's what that says. Or no, if anything is excellent and praiseworthy, think about such things. So I think that's important that we focus on the positive in our lives, and we focus on not necessarily going away from bad things, but moving towards positive things. Yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you took something from this video. Have a great day.